we're now through to the plenary, and we have Steve Cook coming on next. And Steve's going to try and make some sense of the whole day for us. He's got a wonderful global perspective. He's had the chance to listen in to all of the sessions, and he's going to present his thoughts on this. And there is a big drum roll. Something pretty significant is about to be launched. So, without any further delay, I'm going to pass over to Mr. Steve Cook.
Good lordy, that was a big build-up. So we shall get to the launch a little bit later. Good afternoon, everyone. What a wonderful event! It's been absolutely amazing. My head is somewhat spinning, and I'm sorry I missed the last part of Chris and George's piece just now, but had to prepare for this. There have been so many rich and diverse and inspiring ideas and insights and new ways of looking at our work and our place and our world. Today, it's just absolutely bewildering. So Nadia, thank you so much. I'm not worthy of all of this, but I am Steve. I'm Steve Cook, and I'm a strategist. Boo, I hear you all cry. I happen to think that Peter Drucker was right about everything, including culture. And I'm also an unswerving optimist. Yay! Depending on who you talk to, I'm also called that bloke, an organisation strategy definer, a leadership confidant, systems obsessive, a creative, a growth catalyst, a visionary, a change maker, a conductor, which is one of my favourites, a coalition builder, a storyteller, and a sweary git. I'll try not to do that too much today, and a reality checker. Now I've got a new title though. I'm a chief protagonist, which I'm absolutely thrilled about. We'll see how that goes. I'm wearing a New Order t-shirt today. I thought I'd wear that because it seemed appropriate, and also if I manage to alienate everybody else today, I'll still have Barry Flaherty, who I know is a big New Order fan. I'm also that loathsome person who is rarely welcome at dinner parties or in business process meetings or anywhere the grown-ups reside. I'm an unashamed idealist. Boo again. By the way, I'm also feckin' terrified, so forgive me. Ladies and gentlemen, we are at a critical moment in the ways that individuals and organisations think about their place, physically and emotionally, their purpose, their priorities, their value, contribution, their behaviours and conduct, and all their interactions with others. For many years, businesses have been slowly, I think, moving from a largely protectionist way of thinking to a more collaborative one with other businesses through strategic partnerships and alliances. More recently, though, I think some businesses have been moving towards ever more meaningful and inclusive and immersive relationships with other types of organisation from other parts of society, and we'll move on to that later. To move beyond business collaboration into something that I think is much more visceral, really innovative co-creation through really compelling coalitions for change, to address substantial issues that are seemingly outside the usual province and role of business generally, or industry specifically, but are really important to the people businesses reach out to. These things are, in my opinion, hugely important for all of us, and certainly all of us here today. So thank you so much to Nadia and the team at ICE for bringing us all together here, and for giving me the opportunity to reflect on the ideas of the giants who have spoken here today, whose steps I now follow in and whose wisdom I will try to build from. I should declare that after a lifetime listening to the infighting between sales and marketing, I wrote in 2016 a piece suggesting that we should get rid of both sales and marketing and customer experience and everybody else who's associated with anything to do with buyers, and replace them with a new entity, something that I call a purposeful coalition. I called it the buyer enablement community back in 2016 because the buyer and their complex needs are the only thing that really matters. Another way of describing the buyer enablement community could be, ironically, to call it a business. But enough about that. My aim today is to share thoughts and ideas on the central event theme, that is what we're all here to do, to build a case for reimagining human roles in future transformation, to reflect on what this means for sales and business and frankly wider society too. This is an overview. It's not a deep dive into any one area, it's a plenary and I'm just going to give an overview. I'm also going to make, as has been highlighted throughout the last few days, an announcement, and I'm going to try and do all of this in the next 20 to 25 minutes. I will leave the last few minutes of my time with you for questions, haranguing, if you want to do that, and chat. And I hope that all of these, except the haranguing, can carry on in the VIP network session and beyond. If I run out of time to take questions now, I'll do that in the network session later. So let me begin. The great systems thinker Peter Senge states that there is no the system. There are only interdependent interactions, patterns, and outcomes. And that statement pretty much sums up my work and my world. I think actually it pretty much sums up yours too. And I know it sums up the world as it is rapidly becoming very much more complex and changed, as it transforms in an accelerated and profound way, and as it desperately tries to either go back to normal or find a slightly new normal. I hope it doesn't do either of these things. I hope, as Chris Kane alluded to earlier this afternoon, that it rips up the rule book and starts again. In the work that I do, mostly centred around change, I've seen a recent step change in the emphasis placed on each of Peter Senge's words that I mentioned earlier, as concepts and behaviours. Until very recently, I think interactions and outcomes were dominant, and they probably still are dominant in many businesses and organisations now. But now I think it is interdependency that has risen to the surface, along with resulting new patterns that form as interdependent parts begin to work and move differently together, to interact in new ways. I think we're seeing this step change everywhere. We're seeing it within businesses, between employees and employers, leaders and followers, teams, partnerships, alliances and collaborative ecosystems, as Mike Nevin and Matt Bray have so insightfully explored throughout today. We're seeing it between business and other society stakeholders, and this is where I mostly work these days, like the civil society, and in all its many forms, and obviously that's a very multifaceted sort of generic title, as witnessed by the rise in business as a force for good, whatever you want to call it. There's many different ways of describing that out there. Significant upscaling in what used to be called CSR back in the dim and distant past, contribution to community, influence in place shaping and making, effects on common social causes, value and much else. We're seeing it between business and governments, education, healthcare and other institutions of authority, and leadership of society's strategic direction and the future, and what we worryingly still call the system. We're seeing it between all of these as each tries to redefine their place, in some cases literally, physically, their meaning and their contribution to change in the future. All over the world, people are advocating an end to the us and them culture of the consumer age and the development of a we culture in the citizen age. And yet we're living in one of the most divisive, polarised and socially aware periods in history. I think division and polarisation are resolved as humanity, but the real difference now is transparency, awareness, share of thoughts, ideas and opinions between people who have access to unlimited real and fake information and to each other. This both polarizes and brings us together. Like yin and yang, polarization perhaps perversely creates an interdependency in itself. But how do we recognize a we culture whilst also kicking the shit out of each other? It's one of the big challenges of our emerging age. In the middle of all this, serious questions are being raised about the role of businesses and even capitalism. And it's less about whether these should exist, although some advocate that they shouldn't, and more about how they should exist and conduct themselves in the future. There are serious questions being raised about the purpose of business. Is it solely about profit and shareholder value, as Milton Friedman and others advocated back in the 1960s or so, and that has been business doctrine ever since? Or is it about social value, social capital, social contribution, whilst also making profits? Is this an unstoppable change in strategic thinking about the role of business, as some hope and as COVID has accelerated? Or is it a blip, an anomaly, something to be tolerated until we all go back to normal? By the way, I spent time with Professor Colin Mayer in Oxford at Saïd Business School. He defines the purpose of the corporation as profitably solving the problems of people and planets, and not profiting from creating problems. Anyway, these are all big, hairy-ass concepts and ideas. Many in business might think that they're just philosophical debate. Some of you here today may think the same thing, and not real business on the ground where the action is. All my work in the civil society, including creating the UK Civil Society Strategy Foundations, suggests otherwise, that business has a vital role to play in society's future. Besides, and here's the thing, it's not really what business thinks about this that is important. The only thing of any consequence is what customers, consumers, and concerned citizens and audiences think. If customers, aka real people, are changing their attitudes to the interactions, interdependencies, and outcomes that they have with business and everything else, and if all the complex value systems that they have are changing, business needs to take all this very seriously. Some businesses are taking this seriously and are profoundly changing as a result. I've spent some of my time over a 35-year career closing the gaps and creating the right interdependencies, interactions, patterns, and outcomes within organisations, in businesses of all scales and markets, in governments, in a wide range of public, NGO, and civil society organisations. But I spend most of my time in trying to close the gaps between these organisations, particularly focusing on the interdependent interactions between the profoundly different types of organisations that drive society, and that's us, by the way, from across business, government, and civil society. I call this compelling coalition building. It's, in fact, I'm just starting a new social enterprise, which is called You, and is centred entirely around purpose-built coalitions. As notionally a strategist, because I can't find a better job title, my role is to identify patterns and create better interdependent interactions, because we're all interdependent now, in my view, find commonalities and engineer better outcomes, all designed to ensure that the compelling coalitions for change, the bringing together of capabilities that I work to create and grow, can become more purposeful, in the visceral, not fluffy sense of the word. Purpose is a tricky one. They can become more beneficial, more profitable in every sense of the word, deliver better outcomes to all their stakeholder communities, and as the mighty Alex Edmonds describes it, grow their pie, all while defining the things that many people in many organisations don't like: ideas, long-term futures, mission. We can debate the distinction between mission, vision, and purpose another time, because that's a whole day in itself. And my personal favourite, organisational conduct. This is often called culture, but I prefer conduct because that's how we really act, how we conduct ourselves, and what informs and is informed by this. By the way, I was talking with a US CEO a while back about meaningful culture. He got angry, and his response to me was, "So you want me to run a daycare centre?" We subsequently had a great chat whilst I was holding a baseball bat, but we can move on to that another time. By the way, wasn't PR Smith's talk about all this really brilliant this morning? Fantastic stuff. Frankly, back to my world, it's a head fuck. Working within organisations is relatively simple. Working between similar organisations, like businesses in partnerships and alliances, is relatively complicated. But working between organisations that are very different from each other, with very different motives, expectations, cultural conduct values, outcome requirements and success metrics, but who increasingly recognise the need to work together interdependently to lead society and social change, that's really complex. It's complex when the interdependent interactions, pattern and outcome requirements are in a steady state. But as I think probably everybody here knows, the steady state, aka balance, is a myth. It doesn't really exist. It always was and it always will be a myth. All these things are continuously changing, whether we choose to see this or not. The reasons for change are many and various. Sometimes, like now, change is profound and complex and overt, chaotic even. But often change is subtle. It's almost benign, barely discernible, until it rears up and bites you where it hurts. Increasingly, and this has been beautifully explored, just brilliant discussions throughout today, in many different ways by all the speakers, there is a need to rethink how we all engage in interdependent interactions between each other as individuals, between parts of organisations, between like-minded organisations, within valuable partnerships and alliances, and most importantly, between individuals and organisations who've never interacted meaningfully before, but who now recognise the need to, because this is an imperative for all of us, for resolution of profound issues, for essential and, dare I say it, systemic change, and for each of us as interdependent individuals. I could bore you all night and into next week, frankly, talking about all this and discussing the known but knowable, and the real killer, the real big one for today's age, the unknowable elements of the future. But I'm going to move on. As I've listened in awe to the brilliantly deep and detailed sessions from everyone here today, and as I gaze in wonder across my own bizarre 35-year career, I can't help but think that there are two simple, common, binding threads to everything. No matter whether I've been studying conceptual thinking, and I did that for 5 years with people including the great film director Stanley Kubrick, who I spent almost every day with for 5 years, which was amazing, or working with global enterprises like Atos or Siemens or Cisco, or with relatively simple businesses, frankly, like Mercedes-Benz, or with organisations dealing with profound social challenges like the NSPCC in the UK, Amnesty International, Cancer Research, or with the institutions that claim to represent us in governments, in education, or with the institutions that provide healthcare, our justice system, or with those that want to find better ways for us to work and live and interact with each other, or in my work with movements and coalitions for change who are looking at really massive subjects like climate change, the future of business, work, the future of work, and George Muir and myself, I'm sure, could have a great conversation over a pint one day, consumerism, capitalism, democracy, or even society itself. I keep coming back to the same two basic concepts. I think we're all selling, and I think we're all selling pretty much all the time. I have argued that selling must, contrary to popular opinion, be the oldest human profession. Who did the first prostitute sell to? Selling and buying, whether with ideas and ways to achieve progress, where we're inviting others to buy into our ideas and these things and to join us, or with simple and complex propositions that we want others to buy from us, we are selling. Despite having never directly worked in sales and therefore being, frankly, the least qualified person here, I and everyone I've ever met has in fact been selling. And when we haven't been selling, we've been buying. Within these contexts, selling and buying are some of the most exciting, noble, progress-making, change-making, empowering and liberating pursuits I think we can engage in. History has proven time and again that selling and buying can change the world. Selling and buying within partnerships, relationships, alliances and coalitions that are all, or should all be, driven by common purpose, be that profit or social value creation or both, are compelling, progressive, truly innovative and highly rewarding. Increasingly, as we understand the interdependencies and therefore interactions between sellers and buyers in new ways, which we must because of everything that I've mentioned thus far, and as we start to use wonderful technologies to enable better interdependent interactions between buyers, sellers, partners and alliances, as has been brilliantly described by Treve Warren and friends in their panel discussion, and by everybody else that's been in the demo jams today. Hats off to all of you for everything that you're doing, it's fantastic. We should perhaps think about something else. Maybe we should think less about digital transformation as a thing, an end goal, and more about how current and future technology can support a far more important and very real transformation that is taking place right now and is rooted in everything that I've shared earlier. A social, human, highly emotive transformation in the way that we all across society, including buyers and sellers, think about our own conduct, value and place. And kind of more importantly, in a way, the conduct, value and place of everybody we're increasingly interdependent with, reliant on, and need to interact with better in the pursuit of common goals. maybe in the future it will be less about buying and selling and more about exchanging ideas, values, needs, wants, aspirations. Maybe the real future place for technology resides in the intersection between all of these and all of us. Maybe as we bring together co-creation, purposefulness, buyer journeys in all their forms, and the process of selling in its broadest sense, it is the technology-enabled human exchanges that become really important. The intersection between selling and buying and exchanging, I think, is an almost entirely unique place. I would argue that the second recurring theme that I keep coming back to in all my work is a concept throughout my life, it's a concept throughout everybody else's lives and our life experiences, and it informs this intersection between buyers and sellers and everything around it. Now, without wishing to state the fucking obvious, we are all human beings. It sounds obvious, it sounds underwhelming in a way to state this, but being human has become, and it always was, the central defining theme for everything else. Every single simple, complicated and complex challenge I've ever addressed has ultimately been a human challenge. Everything everyone here has ever done has ultimately been either a human challenge and resolution therein, or an experience or an exchange, whether we realised it or not, and I think sometimes we often don't. Every intersection between sellers and buyers, no matter how many stakeholders, no matter how broad or deep the ecosystem, no matter how rich or poor the data is, no matter how much is at stake, and no matter how complex the interactions are, is ultimately a human intersection. It is where often forgotten human traits live: trust, belief, emotion, intuition, confidence, creativity. Big one for me. It's 35 years being a creative, still don't know what the word means. Perspective, as P.R. Smith alluded to in his World Poverty poll today, which I thought was excellent. Perception versus reality, debate, anxiety, need for proof, need to be liked, need to be a hero, right? Need to feel good about ourselves, need to feel safe. The list goes on and on. But here's the thing, in fact, here's the thing. Over the decades, centuries even, I would argue that the humanity that sits at the intersection of selling and buying and should sit at the centre of technology futures has been eroded. The industrial age, whichever one we're in now, the pursuit of ever greater economic efficiency and productivity, the emergence of ever more ubiquitous technologies, people's acceptance of all this and the benefits that it all brings may have begun to max out. As the great Professor Roger Martin states, maybe like overwhelming, crushing love, we can have too much economic efficiency. Maybe we've reached a tipping point where the losses to humanity are beginning to be seen as greater than the gains. This is all being hotly debated in every aspect of society, from education to charity, from work to home, from the ways we vote to the ways we define our values, and critically in the ways we define business and its roles and purpose. So why wouldn't we seriously debate it here, at the critical intersection of all manner of rich and vital human interactions? Why wouldn't we think about the roles of technology and humanity through a different lens, a lens that is firmly pointing to the future? David Attenborough, who in my view is an international treasure, I hope everybody here has heard of him, was interviewed recently. He stated that at age 92, he felt that he was literally born into a different evolutionary age from those born in the late 20th and early 21st centuries. He said that he was born in the industrial age, but that those born much more recently are in a completely different age, the human age. I agree. I think he's right. I believe that we are living in a new human age. We are living in a new human age where we need to redefine almost everything, and we certainly need to redefine selling and buying, if not for ourselves, then for future generations of humans, buyers, sellers, exchangers, citizens. Shreve Warne, who you have heard throughout today, agrees too. Between us, and with the support of others, we have decided to call for a new age of sales. Our shared views, although we come from radically different backgrounds about this, are so strong and so deeply felt that we chose to create a manifesto for change. Not transformation, certainly not digital transformation, but real human change in the ways that sales is defined, orchestrated and conducted, to be better fit for future purpose, for human purpose, to better serve interconnected, interdependent individuals, organisations, alliances and society, to better meet the needs of everyone who currently works in this wonderful profession that we call sales, and everyone who follows in the future, and to reinstate the human condition that sits at the intersection between sellers and rapidly changing buyers. As our discussion about all this grew and we realised that we were far from alone in our thinking, we decided to embed a manifesto into what we hope will be a growing movement for change within the sales community at large. Today, he says nervously, here at ICE 2020, on behalf of Treve Warren, myself and all those who have supported us so far, I am proud to introduce our movement to you and the wider world. We have called our your movements, quite obviously. Now go for it, Darren. Age of Human. Age of Human is designed to be a place for a manifesto for change, a place where we can debate the relative roles between humans and technology, a place where we can start to think about how technology can work for the future. And we can use this slider just as a way of thinking about it. We can use this slider to sort of gauge where we are on this scale. Darren, if you want to just scroll down for a while, that would be great. I'm not going to take you through the site now, that there isn't enough time, but just to say that we have some big emotive statements in here that I'd really love everybody to pay attention to and come onto the site. It's called ageofhuman.org, and to have a look at our site, to have a look at ways in which you can contribute to it, to see our manifesto and the things that Treve, myself and others have put up here with sort of heartfelt conviction, and to have a look at some of the blogs and to get yourself involved. We're starting small. We can't do all this in one big hit, and we really require and need everybody that at least in part feels empathy with all of this to come and join us and to come and join our movement for change. So please get yourselves onto ageofhuman.org. Please have a read of our manifesto. Please challenge it. Please debate it, please contribute to it if that's the way you wish. But we really would love to see you there, and we'd love to see you taking part in what we hope to be building for the future. Thank you, Darren. You can quit out of that now if you want. And I can get back to my screen. So thank you for sharing that. You can visit and join the movement. It's your movement here at ageofhuman.org. You can find out more about us and the manifesto and read these insights and so on. Age of Human is starting small, but we hope it will grow and begin to shape with your valuable contribution the future direction of travel of the wonderful profession and human interaction that we call sales. We want all of you and every enlightened sales professional and leader out there to help build Age of Human, to share ideas and help to create the future. It's the future that we hopefully all want to see, and so we should make sure we're part of that. We hope that you'll take your time to look at what we started. So it's time for me to go. Yay, you'll be pleased to hear. But as a passing thought, absolutely everything that I have discussed in the last 20-25 minutes and everything we can be for the future is technology and data enabled, with a caveat. Every transformation, every benefit, every millimetre of progress we make will have technology and data at its core from now on, but only if us humans use it wisely. The challenge, however, in how to better use that technology and data to truly achieve what some talk about, but only a few action, I mean successfully putting the human being in the age of humans at the centre of our universe. I think we're very close to the point where the answer to this will be the defining feature of how we define business, sales, and society in our human age. We owe this to each other, and we owe it to those who follow. Thank you very much for your time today, guys. Cheers.
Steve, wow, thank you. Just for the record, actually, that was JP who brought that slide up and not Darren, so that's who you need to have a word with.
I'm not going to have a word with anybody. I'm just happy to have got through the last half an hour.
No, I think there's so much that's gone on today that I can't really start to summarise what you've summarised. All I can do is say thank you sincerely to you, Treve, and everybody who's spoken today, and particularly the team behind the scenes, the guys here who've been pulling the, well, I was going to say pulling, they've been turning the switches and doing various things with knobs and all that sort of stuff. And for our first ICE symposium, I think we're all pretty pleased the way it's gone today. So all that's left now is for me to welcome everybody into the networking session. So I believe if you go into the side of the screen there, you'll see there's a link there to networking, or if you go to the ticketing area, there's networking. If you can't see what I'm referring to, then just go into the chat and message us, and we'll invite you into networking. We're going to have a little plenary of the plenary in there. I think it must be beer o'clock somewhere, so I'm hoping there's going to be a beer somewhere, and we're just going to go through a couple of the points that were raised today. We've got a load of actions to come off the back of this. There'll be a publication. I know there'll be some white papers that have been developed, and a lot more will be talked about over the next few weeks and months. So from me, officially, this is the end of the formal part of the ICE symposium, and see you in the networking. Thank you.